John, tell us a little bit about your business and how you've driven productivity in it.
Well, we've done our best to run the business in a way which is satisfying for people who are working there, to have high morale, to focus people on what really needs to be done. And if you divide the total gross profit that we make by the number of employees, we do have a pretty high figure, which we're very proud to achieve. Perhaps I can just say something, though, away from JML to the wider economy. And that is that if you look at the figures, they really are terrible. I believe that we've now got to a stage where productivity is slightly higher than it was in 2008, but that's nearly a lost decade. And why on earth have we managed to get ourselves into such a bad position? Well, I think the answer, to a fairly large extent, is fairly obvious. I mean, people talk about a productivity puzzle. I mean, I think that the main reason why we're in this condition is because the level of investment into assets which actually produce higher output per hour, which essentially is really only mechanisation and technology. If you look at everything else, ever since the Industrial Revolution started, investment in housing and roads and schools and hospitals and all this sort of thing doesn't itself increase economic growth. What does is investment in mechanisation and technology. And our rate of investment across the piece is dismally low. A few years ago, it was about 17% of GDP. In 2015, it fell to 13%. It's now even lower than that. I think it's 12.7 in the first half of this year. And of that, only about a quarter gets invested in technology and mechanisation. And by the time you take depreciation off that, there's nothing left. And it really does seem to me in these circumstances hardly surprising that we've got this lack of productivity increase. Now, what can we do about this? I mean, it does seem to me that the most important thing from a macroeconomic point of view is to shift up the total proportion of GDP that goes into investment, and within that, to push up the total amount that goes into technology and mechanisation. Now, technology spreads right across the piece, includes quite a lot of the service sector. Mechanisation does to some extent, but a lot of that has to do with light industry. And one of the huge problems we've got in this country is we've deindustrialised. As late as 1970, about a third of the economy came from GDP. Now it's barely 10%. And as a result of all this, the amount of light industry that we've got that is internationally tradable has diminished enormously, more or less been wiped out. And as this is preeminently the area where productivity increases are easiest to achieve, we've paid a very heavy price for this. So both in terms of rebalancing the economy and getting better blue-collar jobs and dealing, to be honest with you, globalisation, to try and get those benefits more evenly spread, what I do think we need to do is to get light industry back into better shape. And I think that's partly an exchange rate issue, and the very fact that the pound has gone down so much and maybe going down a bit further, I think gives a very substantial glimmer of light that we may be getting back onto the right track again.